Hello, beautiful people. It's Tashana Burrell, and I want to welcome you back to Transformation Academy, the place where kingdom moms in ministry who desire to be a part of the marketplace come for a soft place to land when life gets hard. Listen, we are doing all things transparency and transformation here. And so on today, it is Tuesday. It is time for our Tuesday transformational tip. And today, it's more or less like a tip and really just a story of transparency. So today might be Transparency Tuesday. Okay? So let's definitely get into today's topic. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you can get notified whenever I'm having these type of videos. And child, whenever you just need a break, a tea talk, or whatever it is, right? Go ahead, like, share, hit that notification bell, help support the channel, and let's just dive right into it. All right, so today's topic is how I overcame miscarriage. This is a very intimate, very vulnerable space, but I want to be able to help so many other people how I overcame the pain of miscarriage. So we overcame 3 miscarriages in 2018. Actually, in 2018, February 7th, we began to transition. I say transition, I don't say a loss. My daughter, because I know exactly where my daughter is. But in 2018, we began transitioning. Her name was Addison Grace. We began transitioning her. And what made that particular miscarriage hard was she was a daughter that we had discovered through prayer. I was actually cleaning out my closet one day, and the Lord spoke that I was going to have a child, and I should name that child Addison. Okay. And so me and my husband went into prayer because we was like, we good at 3, Lord. Like, what? Okay. So we prayed, and then we had a peace about it. Now, my husband, he actually, he has a story. He has a testimony all his own where God was preparing him for the loss. But he had, maybe I'll have him share at one point, but he began to brace himself for the transition of our daughter, unbeknownst to me. But on February 7th, I began to transition. My body began to miscarry and reject Addison. I remember waking up and seeing the brown, sorry for the graphics, stains, and immediately going to my journal and praying. And when I prayed, I asked God to protect my princesses, protect them. And I went about my day. Went and got the report. The doctor confirmed it. We received it, and then we went on with the process of miscarrying or transitioning her. Now we transition Addison. I actually began writing a book, and then when I almost got finished with that book, I had another miscarriage in March, and then finally completed the book and had another miscarriage in October, and then I got the book out. And it wasn't until I was able to get the book released that I started to actually feel the relief. Now, I was restored after the first miscarriage, my mind and all of the things, right? But I noticed that I had such a motor in me and a purpose in me after that pain. I started to think to myself, somebody else is going through this. How can I help somebody else, Lord? That was my defense mechanism, right? So writing the book initially helped me get over the feelings that I had when it came down to actually going through the miscarriage. And so these are some of the things, and I have them written down. These are some of the things that I was feeling at the time. And I talked about it in my book, but in a weird way, the writing and the journaling is one of the ways that I was able to cope. And also for me, knowing that, y'all see my nails. My daughter did my nails and she didn't finish them. But for me, knowing that somebody else would be able to hear my story and be helped that also helped me overcome. It was like I had to rationalize that there's a deeper and a greater purpose beyond just my pain, and it can be to help somebody else get through their pain. Like, that's my giving personality coming through. So I initially felt very numb as it was happening, and if you can relate to this, just drop in the chat or comments. But I felt numb. My initial response was to take care of everybody else. Again, that was my rationale in writing the book. But also, in a more intimate thing, it was, let me make sure the kids are good, and let me make sure my husband Avery is good, and let me find other things to do. You guys, I went straight to work. Like, I was like, I have clients that are waiting for me at the time. I actually went to meet with a doctor who was getting ready to get life insurance on their children as I was, miscarrying my child. I'm worried about the life of his children. So everybody else mattered. And I was denying and neglecting myself and my privilege to process. Okay. I remember the biggest thing that I was feeling was the fear of actually breaking down. How many of you have felt that? Like, you're so afraid to break down. It's like, if I break down, who's going to put me together? Those were my exact words when I actually reached out to get even additional help. It was, I can't afford to break down. I have 3 other children depending on me. I have a husband who I don't even know how he's feeling. So I was afraid to break down. I was afraid to be completely unraveled with this new pain that nobody is talking about. I had no really point of reference because nobody in my family had ever told me that they had gone through it. Same for my husband. So it was just me. And then, of course, it was my husband, but we both were dealing with our own set of issues, which is a whole nother bag, right? So let's get into that, because he was feeling away, I was feeling away. And what was happening was we both were suffering in silence, and we didn't know how to be there for each other. He said, this is another mountain that I had to overcome. So I had to overcome how I was feeling with the numbness, the denial, the neglect, the fear of breaking down. And then I had to deal with the separation, that me and him being silent is this elephant in the room, me not knowing how to comfort him, him not knowing how to comfort me being upset because he wasn't there to comfort me. Like, I began to later on resent my spouse. I began to later on resent my husband. And I can see how divorce is a real thing when people lose children, whether it's a miscarriage or child loss, or you done lost your son at 23. And you're like, the way we process, it truly does impact the way we care and we love on each other in one of the most painful seasons, a marriage or a relationship can go through. And so that was the thing. I had to overcome my feelings. I had to overcome, my feelings toward my spouse. And then I had to overcome depression. Because depression crept through the anger and the resentment. It was like that opened the door for depression to come on in. Because I had closed myself off to my husband. I had closed myself off to people. I had dove into work like never before. And then at night I would cry and I would curse my body for not doing what it's supposed to do. And I honestly feel like this is a good place to just pray for you, to pray for the woman and the couple and the parents that are suffering with this kind of loss, that feel lost within the loss, that are depressed, that are deprived, that are upset about their womb. I told my husband, I feel like my womb is literally a tomb. For the woman that feels like your body betrayed you, I am praying for you, sis. I love you. You can come out of this. And today I am living proof to let you know that yes, it hurts and yes, it's hard, but you can be healed and you can overcome. So what did it take for me to get out of there? Jesus, what did it take for me to get out of that pit of pain? You ready, sis? I know. So let me just break down these 3 P's that helped me, okay? Some of it is spiritual. You already know, you on the Kingdom channel, all right? So yes, prayer was a lifesaver, right? But it was a point where I was mad at God and quite honestly too mad to pray. And so if you're there, it's understandable. I've been there. But before prayer was my option, honestly, people. It was people. It was a podcast that saved my life. It was searching for people that knew what I was going through. So I, like you probably have, I started the Google thread. I started to look for the support groups. I started to look for people that could uplift me and motivate me and move me and just some person to understand what I was going through. People. All right, the people. I searched for things and people that had my solution. And then it was my passion for people that started me writing and started me journaling or creating the book. I would definitely say that journaling and searching for my people, my tribe to help me through it was one of the first ways that I overcame, because God put a desire in my heart to be like, all right, how can you help people write a book? When I didn't even really know what I was supposed to write other than what I was going through. But through documentation, he started to deal with me. I started to get those feelings out, right? And then my love for people pushed me to keep writing, right? And then I started to pursue the voices of other people, positive people to pour into me, all these P's, child. I really want to get this out right so y'all get it. So people and journaling, right? Number 1. Number 2, a podcast saved my life. So I came across a podcast, and this particular podcast, this woman was speaking, and she was talking about being a kingdom woman and creating and starting a business. Once I started with the book, I already knew that I wanted to launch some kind of business to follow up with the book so that I could go out and help. And it wasn't really a book, but it was a ministry. However, she was a Christian woman in business, and she was offering a strategy session. And so I said, why not? I can book this. I could learn how to start this nonprofit, the Addison Grace Project, and then I can be of help to people. And so listening to her podcast gave me hope. Listening to her podcast gave me a way out. I reached out to her. We scheduled a meeting. And when we got to the meeting, what I thought was going to be a meeting about business was a meeting for breakthrough. Listen, that breakthrough was appointed. And I shout out to Tiana Blyden and Proverbs 31 Boss podcast. I'll link that show below. I think she's well into 200 episodes now. But I met with her, and she gave me the freedom to break down. And when I was able to admit that I was afraid to break down, that was the first place where I verbalized it. And she said, well, we got all day. You're going to sit here and God needs to deal with you, because we need to deal with that before we can deal with this. And so she gave me that freedom to be able to break down and break through. And then we strategized how I would release my podcast called Addison's Place at the time. It went on to become the Miscarriage podcast. I'll link that in the show notes as well. But we went on to release that podcast, and that podcast really helped me. So what that podcast did for me was, now all the things that I was writing, it helped me verbalize it. And if you know anything about me and you follow me and followed me through the years, I tell people all the time that there's so much value in your voice. When I begin to put a voice to what tried to victimize me, y'all, I'm getting ready to shout right now. When I began to put a voice to what tried to victimize me, it wasn't even about whether I would get listeners or people would tune in, but that platform was a setup for God to literally turn the pain into purpose, and for him to start doing a work in me. Let me tell you something. If you went through it or going through it and you cannot find a person to connect with, start podcasting. Even if you find a podcast, even if you go back and watch all of my old podcasts about miscarriage and breaking through, still start your own and put a voice to it. Okay? All right? I'm telling you, it'll get you right. It'll get you together. So podcasting was number 2. Number 3, and we're going to round this thing out. It was prayer. It was prayer. So even in the midst of me podcasting and journaling, I would find myself binging, watching Netflix, not wanting to do nothing, not wanting to go to church, like the things. My husband discovered that I was depressed when he asked me if I wanted to eat, and I kept saying no. Y'all gotta know your girl loves food. I love me a good plate of anything, okay? And so that was like, his antennas went up, and then my antennas went up, because I was like, how many days has it been since I ate? And I was like, oh no. And then I got real mad at God, like, Lord, not only did we go through this, but now I ain't eating. Like, how much can I take? Y'all gonna find out I'm silly. So I'm laughing now, but I wasn't laughing then. I was really mad. Like, that was my real question. Like, okay, took my desire to eat. And then I remember, okay, this is a sign of depression. And so I had a breakthrough in that moment where I said, God, why did you take my baby? And so this is what you need to understand. I was praying. I know people tell you don't question God. I know they're like, God never made mistakes. He would never, and did it. I said, why would you take my baby? Who do you think I am that I can deal with this? I started to have communication with God. And that's what we need to understand, that God is not far from us. That he said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you, right? And so even when we're going through the toughest trials of our lives, he's still there. We can reach out. We can talk to him even in anger. He understands. He's been human. And so then he answered with the word. He said, before I formed her, I knew her, and I ordained her a prophet in your womb. Jeremiah 1:5. And so when he said that to me, it was, okay. And he said, I know what I told you to name her. Her name will carry legacy. It's all for a purpose. And honestly, that was the thing that shifted in me. That was the thing that got me back to praying. The word brought me back. The scripture brought me back. Thy word have I hid in my heart, O Lord, that I might not sin against thee. Guys, if I didn't have the word anchored in me, I probably still would be out of my mind, mad at God, because I wasn't going to hear anything. But he understood that the word would bring me back. I'd encourage you to get into your word. Speak to God, even in anger. Ask for a scripture. Ask for a scripture to stand on. Something to get you through. And so after that, I said, well, let me tell you something. I ain't even talking to Avery right now. He said, y'all got to pray and you got to talk to him. You got to ask him. You got to verbalize. He doesn't know he's going through too. I said, he's not going through. I'm going through. And then he showed me an open eye vision. It was only one of the few that I've received in my life, of my husband, balled up like a fetus, crying. And it was almost like it was real time, because when I got off the couch and went back to the room, I could hear my husband in the bathroom. Almost like I was envisioning him. He was crying and weeping. I stood by the door and I started crying. He came out, and how he came out is our bed was right there by the bathroom. I grabbed his hand. I said, we got to pray. He looked at me like I was a whole hypocrite. Because he like, you want to pray with me? You ain't talk to me. All you do is get mad at me. Like, that's what his eyes was saying, but they was red. And I know he didn't want me to know that he was crying. But I was like, the Lord showed me you was crying. I was still being petty in that moment. But because I read his eyes. You know how they be talking to you without talking to you. So I was like, I know you've been crying. We need to pray. So, so we started to pray together. And that for us, it tore down some walls. It made the conversation between he and I a lot easier for me to say, well, this is how I've been feeling. And I want you to feel how I feel. And it's been hard for me because I want you closer, and I know I'm pushing you away. I had to get very vulnerable. And I would say, get very vulnerable with your spouse and let them know exactly what you're feeling. Even though it hurts you to say it, you got to talk. The tough conversations is what will take you from this level of discomfort to overcoming and becoming a couple of destiny in this, because I believe that God allows us to go through these type of trials as a couple because there's a great destiny on your life, and you and your spouse have the ability to impact people in so many different ways, right? And so you definitely want to have the talks, all right? That helped us overcome this tragedy, this hard trial. It was worth it. So the three things, the people, podcast, and prayer, are the three things that helped me overcome my miscarriage. I pray that this video helped you. I pray that, if you want to learn more or speak more, reach out to me. But I love you guys. God bless you, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.